In this video, what I'm going to do is build the T-Rex again, but this time I'm going to use edge extrusion. Go to my create panel, I'm going to make a plane, and I'm going to stick it on the origin. I'm just going to modify it so that it is as simple as it can be. And then I'm going to convert this to an editable poly. This is a plane and it already has open edges. And if I shift and drag as I go to move an edge, so if I just click and drag, I can move an edge around, but if I hold the shift key down and then click and drag, you can see it makes new geometry. It effectively does an extrusion, but this time it's just with an edge, not with a face. So I'm only going to model half of the T-Rex, and then I'm going to use the symmetry modifier. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is on Y0, because that's exactly where the origin is. And I'm going to move these verts up and place them roughly into position. And I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to switch to the lasso tool because I'm just more used to it. What I will tend to do is I know that I'm primarily working facing the y-axis, so I will tend to switch over to screen mode so that I'm moving around in screen space. This I just find much better for organic modeling. And then I will still adjust the y-axis so I can pull this in. It's just on the surface, just by coming down here and shifting along the y-axis. And this coordinate system is still in world space. I can always subdivide this geometry, so if I click on this edge and go ring and connect, you can see that I've added the extra geometry, and this vertex here is kind of residing on the surface, but as you can see I can adjust this round. And again, if I come up to here and select this edge, I can shift drag, but now I'm in screen space, so if I shift drag this edge off, I'm not staying on the orthogonal axes. So then what I need to be aware of is this vert isn't necessarily going to be on the origin. So what I find very useful about edge extrusion is that you can concentrate directly on the mesh flow. So if you remember when we were box modeling, kind of made a volume that encompassed most of the body, and then we were doing face extrusions to pull the geometry out. What I will do if I'm working in edge mode is I will go directly into making those extrusions and not worry about the volume. Let's just select this vert and push it in. I will shift drag along here. This is my elbow joint, and because the natural pose for the T-Rex is to hold the arm at this elevation, what I will do is I will come off this edge, so effectively I'm changing the mesh flow. And what I mean by this, if we select this edge here and I go ring, then you can see that the edges link together and run off down here. The mesh flow doesn't come around the corner, it doesn't go round the elbow. So I'm not going to work all the way down to the claw level because I want to be mindful of the rate of detail that I'm working at. At this point I can also think about where I'm going to split. I know that I'm going to have to split the geometry at this point just to get this edge to come along here. going to collapse those two verts. I'm going to reduce this complexity by doing a vertex weld. This will break the mesh flow, but it's also important not to have that complexity run off into the body. If I select this edge, we can see how the ring stops the moment it hits the triangle. Let's look at the rear leg, which will have a much better mesh flow. And what I'm attempting to do here is to use as broad a stroke as I possibly can. I don't want to generate lots and lots of tiny little triangles or quads, so I want to make big adjustments. I want to try and do as much as I can in a few as component pieces as possible. And this is what we mean by low frequency or broad brush strokes. Trying to do all the big features, not worry about the little features. If I select the edge at the bottom and I go into a ring, we can see how this edge progresses up along this leg, and this is a good mesh flow because it is following the contour of this leg. This edge is incomplete, so it follows up here, and again when we go in to fill in the rest of it, it will probably flow up to about here and then will probably loop around the body. Same with this loop. At the moment it's incomplete, so it's going to flow up here and probably be on the inside of the leg. So it's not too late to make adjustments to this. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to refine this geometry in here. This edge I will use to sketch out the tail. So that's the tail sketched in. Let's do the head. This edge here I'm going to use to extend down to the jaw. This edge here will be the upper part of the skull. This eye socket, it's a good idea to give it some geometry, even though it's fairly early on, because it's quite a prominent feature. I'm not likely to miss it when I do another iteration. Just make it easier for me to plan out as I go into the later stages. So this is our basic form. On the next video I'll close the rest of this geometry in and we will see a much better representation. But what we want at this stage with this first pass on the edge loop is it looks like a sketch and it looks reasonably recognizable, kind of in a Pictionary style. Would you know what this was? I think most people could have a guess that this was a T-Rex.